When I share on social media that I only list items for $50 or more, I get a lot of comments. I get a lot of questions too, but I get a lot of comments that say, well, that's nice for you, Rebecca, but I don't find those kinds of items. That's not what I can get at my thrift store. I don't have those kinds of brands. That's good for you, but I can't do that. And so I have to just sell lower end items. How can I do that better? And the answer is you really can't. The answer is I tried that, and there's no way that you're going to make the kind of money that you want to make with a labor intensive nature of reselling if you're selling those low value items. The numbers just don't add up. And so today's video is all about how to sell higher ASP items. I have 6 steps for you, and I have, of course, a little bit of backstory just to give you a little bit of context for what we're going to be talking about today. So when people say that they can't find these $50 items, I understand. I do, because I was at a place where I was going to the bins and I wasn't finding $50 items regularly. I was finding $10 and $15 items, and even that, just to find good condition, noteworthy brands, was difficult. So I get what you're saying. At the same time, now that I've done it for several years, I call BS on it, because we all are on the internet selling, which means we can all be on the internet buying, or we can all widen the sourcing strategies that we utilize to get other kinds of items that can raise the bar for our reselling business. So like I said, I used to buy at the bins dollar items and sell them for $10 to $15. And I realized that that was never going to get me where I wanted to go. And I was not a 6-figure reseller that way. It wasn't until I started selling $35 items and only putting $35 items into my Poshmark closet that I became a 6-figure reseller. Somewhere between only listing $35 items and only listing $50 items, because once I realized that $35 worked out, I saw the value and the momentum and the bigger sales of doing that specific strategy and what we're going to talk about today. Then I leveled it up even more and went to 50. So my point with that is that if you want to sell higher ASP items and you think that $50, which is what I'm going to be talking about today, is out of your reach, start with 35. If you think 35 is out of your reach, start with 25. Level up to a point where you think it's a stretch and it's going to be hard, but it's more possible for you. Get that working in your favor. And then once you get to that point, then you can do it again and step up again and go like I did, from $10 to $15 items to $35 items to $50 items. And who knows, maybe next I'll start only selling $100 items. You never know. I do like $50. It's a good price point. So let's get into the 6 steps I have for you on how to sell higher ASP items so you can make more money on Poshmark, make more sales on Poshmark, and just improve your reselling business overall. Step 1 is research and criteria. So in order to sell $50 items and insert $35 items or whatever you're focusing on, you need to know what a $50 item is. And if you don't right now, that means you need to start with some research. So whether it's going back to your own solds on Poshmark to see what you have sold for $50 or more, or what you listed for $50 that sold for $35, whatever kind of criteria you set up for yourself. For me, I like to list for $50 with the hopes that I'm going to sell anywhere in the $25 to $35 range on average. Pretty much that's what happens. So you want to research what these items are. You need like a hit list. You need some criteria. So start with your own solds and go through and identify anything you've already done in your history with your own experience that meets these criteria. If you don't have that kind of track record, that's fine. You can go to a reseller influencer like me, and you can go, although it feels weird to say that, but you know what I mean, somebody on YouTube sharing information. Any of the other people, anybody like me that's on YouTube, on Instagram, go to any of our closets and look at our solds and identify the ones that start to meet your criteria. I would do that first, because you know that the people that are sharing reseller information are kind of in the know on reselling, and maybe what they're doing isn't just a fluke. And so it's maybe backed in more real life experience. So I would go to your solds, I would go to a reseller content creator and see their solds that meet your criteria. And then the next thing I would do to widen your search even more is to go on Poshmark and look at the solds on Poshmark and identify the ones that meet your criteria. So for me, oftentimes I will go to Poshmark, filter by sold, filter by an item type like dresses or pants, and I will go ahead and then filter by price, 50 to 100, and see what things are selling within that price range, within that item type that sold recently, and identify anything that comes up a few times so that you can see that it's not just a fluke. It's something that will happen again or has happened multiple times, and so there's a little bit more to it. With Poshmark, you do have to take those solds with a grain of salt, because if something sells, I forget if it's with an offer or with a bundle. I think it's if it sells in a bundle, it doesn't show the actual price that it's sold for. It just keeps that original price. I'm pretty sure it's with a bundle. I forget, I've gotten confused. Either offer or bundle. So sometimes the sold values that are shown on Poshmark are not the actual sell price. So you always have to take it with a grain of salt. But if you see something come up multiple times, all within the same price range, and then you click into the brand and you see that the availables look like it's on point with that, other solds are on point with that, then you can kind of get more of a feel that that's a true comp and not just a random fluke with bad information. But if you're doing this, checking your solds, checking the solds of reseller content creators, and then checking the solds on Poshmark, you can develop a great criteria list of brands, item types, fabric types, styles, and price points that work for you with what you're trying to target now. So this is not stuff that you do run of the mill every day. We're trying to level up here. So this is an aspirational list of things that will work really well for you. Now, if you haven't seen my Poshmark Bolo research videos, go ahead and check those out. I will link those up here. A playlist. I'm starting to do them regularly as long as everyone likes them. And so those will give you a little bit more of an idea of how I specifically do this type of research and how you can do it too. And you can identify some brands along with me and then go ahead and do it for yourself as well. So the goal here is to make a list of items that you can target. Now remember, just because you found a sold for Prada for over $50 doesn't mean that all of a sudden, now that you've identified it on your list, you're magically going to find it at your thrift store. That's not how it works. You want to have an aspirational list, but it also has to be steeped in what you think is possible for you. So for me, a torrid dress is totally possible for me to find locally. Or Spanx faux leather leggings. That is totally possible for me to find locally or online. That's a manageable thing that I know that I can list for $50, get the price point that I'm looking for, but it's a specific thing that I targeted based on my research and criteria that I set up for myself. Some other items that I'm referring to are, let's say, a Zara midi dress. I know I can list that for $50. I do it all the time, and I know it sells within the price point I'm looking for. Or a Talbot's cashmere sweater. These are not crazy things that you're never going to find. These are totally possible, but you have to identify them and then go out and specifically target them instead of hoping that you're going to find them. And so developing your research and criteria is the first step, and what I just said, targeting, that's the second step. So step number 2 is targeting. You want to target the things that you've put on your list. You want to identify, how can I actually go out and find these items? This is where you need to get out of your comfort zone a little bit and put in a little bit of creative work in order to identify these things. But once you find these new options for sourcing and you get kind of like a process and a system and you get familiar with them, it's a lot easier to kind of follow through on a regular basis. For me, the way I online source now is my regular sourcing. Going to a thrift store for me would be the weird, odd thing out of my comfort zone because I don't go to them. I haven't gone to thrift stores in years, and I've been a 6-figure reseller for the last couple of years now, and I haven't done it by going to a thrift store. So obviously, you can keep going to your regular sourcing places. If you normally shop at the bins, if you normally go to Goodwill, if you normally go to Salvation Army, if you have a nice little church, mom and pop type thrift store that you go to and that's your honey hole, you can keep doing those things. You're going to need to source regularly. What I'm saying is, now that we're identifying that we want to level up and target some of these specific brands, specific item types, whatever's on your criteria list, If you find them at your regular place, great. That's bonus. You didn't have to do any extra work. But if you're not finding them at your regular place, now we need to add on some creative options. So if you don't normally but have one near you, you may want to consider a buy, sell, trade store. For me, a Plato's Closet or a Style Encore are some of the best places to source for me. Not so much Plato's Closet for me. I like doing Style Encore and I have really great luck with finding things there. So that's a great option if you have one nearby. There's also Avalon Exchange, Buffalo Exchange, Clothes Mentor. There's lots of different ones. So look up what you might be able to find in your area. Then if you want to just add on more options locally, you can. Obviously, you don't need my help with that. You can go ahead and research all sorts of thrift stores in your area and just start going to new places. But the online piece, going onto Poshmark, Mercari, eBay, other peer-to-peer platforms, going onto ThreadUp, going onto the RealReal, going onto other online consignment stores. What can you find there that is on your target list at the buy cost that you need it to be at in order to make a profit? Can that work out for you? For me, that works out quite often. Not all the time. I have a Band-Aid here. I don't know if you noticed that. Not all the time, but it is a great way to add things in when I'm specifically looking to target certain types of items. I'll give you a few examples in a moment. The other thing is online bulk sourcing. So I'm a big fan of Helpsy Source. It's pretty much the only bulk source that I have and has been for quite some time. And so I order my pallets from them and I order bulk boxes from them. And so if you want to order from them, you can get 10% off with my code Rebecca the Reseller. But I encourage everyone to pick wisely, do your research, do your homework there. Don't just go buy whatever box, make sure that it works for you. But these are a lot of ways that you can add them in to your sourcing repertoire and target the items that you're looking for. So instead of just showing up to Goodwill on a Tuesday, because that's the day that you have a babysitter, and hoping to build your business around what you find on that random Tuesday, instead of doing that, now we're going to say, how can I find more Talbot cashmere sweaters? How can I find more Spanx faux leather leggings? How can I find more Zara midi dresses? Is there a bulk box that will have these? Is there someone selling it on Poshmark and I can send them an offer and get it low enough so that I can flip it for more because I know that that item is going to do really well? Can I go on to ThreadUp and make a big bundle from their outlet, get a bunch of stuff for cheap so that I can sell it for more on Poshmark? These are all different things that you can do to target those specific items. The other thing I forgot to mention, I'm just looking at my notes, is that you can do online arbitrage. And I do this semi-often. I don't do this all the time because it can be a little pricey, but there are a few tips that I have to kind of get worth it. So if you have a particular brand, let's say you really like selling Athleta, I've done this a lot, I will go to the Athleta clearance section and I will see what I can buy and then flip for higher. And when I do that, I'm going to stack it with any coupon codes that Athleta offers. I'm also going to take any gift cards that I have or discounted gift cards that I may have purchased. And I'm going to stack that with my Rakuten account, whatever it's called. And Rakuten gets you cash back for shopping at certain retailers online. And so if you aren't signed up for Rakuten, use my link, which is down below. If it's not actually down below, it's in my resource guide, which is linked down below. And that will get you some bonus cash back and me bonus cash back when you sign up. And Rakuten is awesome because you get the cash back, plus you can use a discounted gift card, plus you can use any discount codes from the brand, making their clearance prices even lower. And then you can go ahead and flip new with tags items for more. So I really do like this. I just don't do it as often as I should. So that was the example for online arbitrage. I've gotten Athleta that way. I wanted to give you a few examples so you can even verify in my closet that I've done all of these strategies. When I go to Style Encore, oftentimes I'm looking for different brands. Sometimes Zara, a lot of times Boden, Draper James. I've bought all those types of items at a buy, sell, trade store and flipped them for more money. I have bought all of these brands on Poshmark. I've bought Lily Pulitzer on ThreadUp and I flipped it on Poshmark. I'm trying to think what else. And then I just said the Athleta. And then from Helpsy Source, everything. Get everything from Helpsy Source, my Zara palettes. I got a Prana palette. So all of these things that are on my target list, I'm specifically trying to identify What am I looking for? What's the source that I can use to regularly go and get it? And once you kind of get used to that process, it takes a little time, but once you get used to that process, that can become a go-to thing for you, or you can layer into what you're already doing, which we'll get to in the next step, a future step. The next step, step number 3, is mind the cost. So when you're targeting items, it is really, really easy to pay too much money. You really need to look at your prior experience or some really solid comps before you can determine if this is something that you can buy. So I have some thoughts on it for you that I want to make sure that we cover. So for my story specifically, I went from being like a $1 cost of goods person because I was shopping at the bins to being like a $5 to $10, which I consider paying up. If you're a bins shopper, $5 to $10 is paying up. If you're constantly paying $5 for items, maybe $10 is paying up. Maybe $20 is paying up. So we might all have different terms for it, but for me, paying $5 to $10 per item was paying up. But once I shifted my thinking, I started to make more money because the items I was buying were targeted. They were specifically picked to be good sellers. And so I felt more confident based on my own research and comps and solds of mine and the research comps and solds that I was looking up and seeing quite regularly, that I could pay $5 for an item and list it for $50 and have it sell for $25 or $35. I felt confident that I could pay $10 for certain items and list it for $50. I'd make a little bit less, but I was still confident that it was a good seller. And so sometimes it's not about getting the item for as cheap as possible because you might sit on that item or you might not make that much. But if you pay more and can earn more and it's a targeted seller, you might end up having a better sell-through. That's what happened to me. My sell-through went up, my sales went up, my cost of goods went up, but overall, my profit still went up. So you can kind of watch those numbers for yourself and see how they play out. In the beginning, I would go slow and I would not pay up for something if it makes you feel uncomfortable. I would start slowly inching up. Maybe you pay $3 for items. Then you pay $5 for items. Then for certain ones, you're like, you know what? I think the profit margin is there. I might be able to pay $10 for this item, knowing that it's going to sell for XYZ amount. So that's where it does get a little bit individualized for what you're looking to get, for what I'm looking to get, the stage in our life, the amount of work we can do. You know, I pay a virtual assistant and a photographer to help me, so I have those costs that I need to take into consideration. I have a storage unit. So there's lots of things that make your business a lot different from my business, where we may vary in this topic. But step 3 is really getting into the numbers of the cost of goods. So first you identified what you wanted, then you figured out a way to find it. Now that you found it, you need to figure out how much can I pay for it so that everything works out on the back end and I can still list it for $50, I can sell it for $25 or $35, I can make the profit I want to make off of the buy cost that I'm finding it at. I did want to make note, I do have a video about paying up that you may want to check out, and that kind of goes into more detail about the criteria that I use to determine when I want to pay up for an item. So that's a resource for you. And then just finally, as like a last note on this step, just to say that typically I am buying for $5 or $10 an item and I'm listing them for $50. And so for me, I know that I will accept or send up to a 50% offer, and that would put me at 25 at my rock bottom. Off of that, with a shipping discount and what I paid for the item, I'm making usually about $13 per item minimum. It's possible that it's 8 if I paid 10 and it sold for 25. I guess 8, but I will tell you that more often than not, the items that I'm selling are selling for higher than the rock bottom that I'm assuming is my worst case scenario. So because I listed at 50, sometimes people buy things for 50. Doesn't happen often, but sometimes they just buy it outright. I have a 20% bundle discount and I send out 20% offers regularly. So sometimes I'm selling things at 20% off, not my rock bottom of 50% off. So when you have that ability to list an item for high enough, you have a lot more wiggle room to sell it at a discount, but it's not always going to sell at that lowest discount. You just have to know that that's like your stopping point, that's your lowest. but oftentimes you're going to sell it for higher. And so when you average out all of those sales, it raises the bar up. So my average sale price isn't 25, it's more like 35 because some of them sell at 40 and some of them sell at 50. So you have to take all that into consideration, but I did want to give like that kind of hard number example so that you understand that the business model you have has to work for your buy cost and your listing price. Step 4 is one of my favorite steps because it's all about replicating. So once you have figured out what you want, you figured out where to find it, you figured out all the money stuff and all the cost stuff, now you can do it over and over and over and over again. And that's one of my favorite things. You guys know I love selling multiple quantity listings. I love selling boutique items. I love doing the work once and selling it again and again. So in this situation, I'm still going after one-off items. This isn't a multiple quantity situation, but the process that I have to find these items becomes rinse and repeat. Once I know that I can go ahead and go to Style Encore and find 2 or 3 Draper James dresses for about $20, I know I can list them for $85, I know they're gonna sell, let's say at $40 worst case scenario, I'm gonna double my money on this item. That's $20 profit. I'm super happy with that. Once I know that that's happened a couple of times, now I have confidence that I can do it more and more. And I can replicate that and I can go to 3 Style Encores. I don't have 3, I only have 2. But I could go to 2 Style Encores, buy all their Draper James, and now I'm gonna end up with some replicatable, I don't even know how to say it, replicatable sales that I can do again and again. You get my point. So this is where the magic happens, because once you've done all this legwork, now you can just rinse and repeat these steps, replicate it again and again. And let's say it works really well for the Draper James dress. Good, that one's like solid. Now I know I can do that without having to re-research it. That's solid. But that makes me think, if it worked with Draper James, can it also work with Eliza J? Let me see. And I go back to my original steps and I see, can I target this item, an Eliza J dress? Can I find this item? Can I go to Style Encore and buy it and sell it for more? The answer is no, because Style Encore prices Eliza J dresses way too high. They're like $32. There's no way I can buy that dress and flip it for more. At least I don't think so. I'm not confident in that, so I'm not gonna buy it there. But if I found it on Poshmark or ThredUp for, I don't know, $10 or $15, I would feel confident that I could sell that Eliza J dress for more money, and that would work out for me. So that's what I mean by, replicating, is that once you identify a format and a system that works, now you want to see what other input can you put into that same process to get more desired outputs. So that's the goal. Each time gaining more confidence so that you can replicate this again and again and fill your store with more of these things. Now let's move on to step number 5, which is give it time. So yes, I know it's gonna be hard because you will have just paid, let's say $5 or $10 for this dress, and you will have listed it, and you listed it for $50, and you can't wait for it to sell for $35 or $40 or $50, and it's gonna be great. And 1 week goes by, and then another week goes by, and it hasn't sold yet. Well, you might be tempted to say, oh my God, I just spent a bunch of money, I leveled up, but nothing is selling. Well, you have to think about it like this. It's a lot easier for people to buy lower end items. It's a lot less investment from them. There are more of them, but a Chico's top could be easier to sell than an Eliza J dress. That's possible. I don't really subscribe to that belief, but you might think that in the beginning because you just bought this Eliza J dress, you just paid up for it, and now it's not selling, but your Chico's tops are selling. You're like, oh my God, this is not working. You have to give it time. You have to give time to listings. Some things we know the second you list it, you get an offer, you take it or you don't, and it sells quickly. Sometimes you have things listed for a year, and then all of a sudden the right buyer comes along and swoops it up for exactly what you wanted it to sell for. So you just never know. But the only reason why you're anxious is because you paid more for these items and because you're doing something different. So you have to relax, trust the process, give it time, and allow those items to work for you. The goal here is to accumulate them. The goal is to, over time, once a week, get a new dress that fits this criteria. The next week, add another dress that fits this criteria. The next week, add a cashmere sweater that fits this criteria. Like, you can set up goals for yourself of how you want to accumulate more of the items that meet this criteria so that over time you have no choice but to be selling more of those items that meet that criteria. The last note on this, I just checked my notes. I said it took me a little while to transition from $35 items to $50 items, but now 90% of my closet is $50 items. And so now I have no choice to be selling more $50 items. So if you're going from $10 to $15 items to $35 items, you need to give it time for you to collect enough of them for the bulk of your sales to have flipped over to the new kinds of items. Okay, step number 6 is scale. So this is where you want all of this to kind of exponentially explode your business. And I will tell you, from having had this happen, it is a really amazing feeling. But I will tell you that I think the secret sauce to this is doing the last step, which is replicating and giving it time. But in order to scale it and see the exponential power of it, you need to match it with not doing all the other stuff. And that might be really hard for some people. I did it at a time where it was what was happening in my business. I'll explain it all in a second. But so if you keep doing what you're doing, buying $10 to $15 items, and then add in the $35 or $50 items sporadically, you'll get there. Eventually it will happen, but it's going to take a while. The scaling step says stop buying all the $10 to $15 items and only focus your attention on the $35 items or the $50 items or the $100 items or whatever you're looking for. Only focus on those. What's going to happen here is you're going to have a dip in sales. You're going to have a sales slump because you stopped buying all the filler stuff that might churn more quickly or might be easier to sell because it's a lower price point. If you stop buying those things, you're going to have less listings go up. You're going to have less sales probably. As you start to ramp up the items that are the 35 or the 50 or whatever you're trying to get, that's going to be a little bit slower because those are going to be harder for you to find. You're going to be doing less listings, but when those items sell, the sales are going to be higher. You're going to have a $35 sale instead of a $10 sale or whatever it is. And so it happens initially, the sales go down, but then it goes like this, like the Band-Aid, like a higher peak. I don't know what the higher trajectory. So that's what happened to me. And here's a real world example. So when the pandemic hit, I got rid of everything. I got rid of my storage unit. I got rid of all of my inventory. I sold it all off because I was staying home. I was homeschooling Joe, and I basically put my whole business on hold. I did sell boutique items and I sold those from home, and that worked out great. That kept me going, but I didn't sell any thrifted items. I got rid of everything. And so when I started back, when I realized I could start selling again, that's when I said, I'm only going to start listing $35 items. So I had no thrifted items in my shop. I only had boutique items, so those are separate. I had no thrifted items. So there were no Chico's tops. There were no Old Navy pants or jeans. There was none of that stuff. So I was only doing new listings for Eliza J dresses. I was only doing new listings for Talbot's dresses or Talbot's cashmere. I was doing $35 items there, not $50 items. So it wasn't really Eliza J. It was more like bread and butter brands, but dresses and blazers and like higher end pieces, not just tank tops and stuff. And then when I went up to 50, then it was Eliza J and stuff. So I was only putting $35 items into my store. And because of that, I wasn't listing as many things. But when I sold something, it was a higher sale. It was a higher ASP sale than I had ever had before. So even if I only sold 2 things that day, that was 2 $35 sales, which before, when I was selling $10 to $15 things, I would have to sell 4 to 7 of those items just to make that same $70. So for me, that was a huge, wonderful aha moment of, I just did the work for 4 to 7 items, and here I only had to do the work for 2 items, and I made the same money. Like, I guess I knew intellectually previously that that was true, but once it actually started happening in my solds, like when I was shipping the items, I was like, what? Like, It's just like, wow. I mean, I probably hadn't had an aha moment like that since the first time I found out that reselling was a thing for profit. Like that someone went to a thrift store and bought items to sell on purpose. Like when I found out that, I was like, mind blown. And then when I figured out that I could sell 2 items for $35 instead of 4 to 7 items for $10 to $15, I was like equally as mind blown. But it was earth shattering for me. And it wasn't until that started happening more often, like more days I was having those kinds of sales because that's all I was filling my store with. That's when I said, okay, if this works for $35, I'm going to do this for $50. And I immediately quickly switched from $35 items to $50 items. Now that transition happened a little bit more slowly because I was filling my store with $35 items at the same time trying to fill it also with the occasional $50 item until I completely switched over to more $50 items. So I hope me kind of breaking that down shows you how you can implement it into your closet, because me going over all of these steps, you're like, yeah, Rebecca, I got it. Find the item, research, okay, yep. But you don't really see how it can actually play out in your closet. And I'm telling you, if you start focusing on the higher value items, like laser focus, and you can get some systems in place to find them, and then you start replicating it, and then you start scaling it by not doing the lower value stuff and only doing the higher value stuff, your closet will completely change, like completely. So those are the steps I have for you. Those are 6 steps. It's a change. It's a shift. It is hard. It's going to feel uncomfortable and you might not want to do it. You might start it and stop. And then you might go back to it. And then you might stop. You need to get the balls up, okay? Like get your balls, get your cojones, get them all going, give yourself a pep talk and be like, I can do this because it's been done before. And I just hate seeing resellers struggling out there doing all the things, steaming items only to sell it for $10, like shopping at the bins for 3 hours and only coming away with a few items. Like you can find a lot of ways to waste time reselling. And I really hope that you start to identify the ways you can be the most efficient and earn more while doing the same, or earn more while doing less. Once I figured all this out with these steps, and I started doing the $35 items and I started doing the $50 items, I became a 6-figure reseller, and I don't work as much as I used to. I do not work as much as I used to. And that's aside from the fact that I have a virtual assistant, a photographer. Like even when I was doing it all myself right after the pandemic, I was making way more money than I ever did. I did all the work myself, but I was doing less work than I had done before, making less money. It is that much of a game changer. I wish you the best of luck with this. I can't wait to hear in the comments how it's working out for you. Go ahead and check out that description down below for all the resources I've put together for you, and I will see you in the next video. Bye.